So we're still on the subject of it's too loud. I hope I've put some tools in your hand to actually measure what's loud and know whether the loudness is coming from the mix that you're doing or whether it's inherently coming from the music group. I want to talk to you now about some more scenarios of different people coming at you and telling it's too loud and what you might do and what you should think through as that happens. One challenge I often make to engineers is it's never overall too loud. There is something that's too loud. When somebody comes to you with an expression of tension, what you've got to start analysing is what are you really hearing? Is there one single thing which right now is offensively out of context? Often it's the context that make things sit right, where everybody becomes comfortable because we are mixing something which has acceptable content. There is context, there is good bass, there is good snare, there is good keyboards, there is a good balance of vocals. If you've got everything in context, you will be surprised at how much louder that can be and still be non-offensive. If we mix out of context, where we have a mix which is incredibly vocal heavy without supporting bass guitar or bass drum, then we will find that that really becomes very stressful very quickly. Now you would think you need to fix this by turning the vocals down, but sometimes it's equally as acceptable to bring the other things up. You have restored context, and in that sense, we've made the mix better. So our friendly person comes up to you and says, look, this is just too loud. Now you've got to be a little bit careful here because it might not be too loud. What they're trying to express is that they don't like it. And it might not be even very good. And the problem you've got right now is it's not your fault that it's not very good because this is coming from the musicians. I would hope you've got great musicians and they're delivering things which are correct for where the church wants to be. But sometimes you end up at loggerheads because everybody wants to blame the guy that stood behind the mixing desk. We all want somebody to blame. And the problem is it's quite difficult for a member of the congregation to go to a worship leader and say, I don't like you and I don't like your music. However, it's quite easy. You're an easy soft target. So I would suggest that you shouldn't get too upset about it if this happens. Be critical of yourself, be critical of what you're hearing. But if somebody is coming to you telling you it's too loud and you interpret that as them really saying they don't like it, but really you don't detect anything wrong with it, you should feel free to maintain your own sanity. Now it could be that somebody is complaining that this thing is hurting their ears, and it could well be hurting their ears. Sometimes as people get older, they develop hypersensitivity, where they're no longer really able to stay in the loud environments that everybody else is happy to stay in. You know, you can do various things there. There will be areas of the church which aren't so intensely loud. If you move towards the back, this area of the church might be 6 dB quieter, maybe even 10 dB quieter than it is where that person is sitting right now. So be mindful that actually encouraging them to change where they're sitting might be a great advantage to them. If you have eliminated these things and somebody comes to you and says, you know, this is hurting my ears, and for the last 5-10 minutes you've been stressing internally because it's hurting yours also, then you really need to do something about it because it's probably too loud. Now, loudness can come from various things. You might have a PA system which no longer has the dynamic range to do what you're trying to do with it. You are trying to drive it too hard and you do not have the resources in terms of amplifier and speaker technology to deliver that experience. Your only choice here, right now you are driving a car down the motorway with the RPM meter at 8,000 RPM, everybody is having an unpleasant loud experience. Back off, find your way back down the mountain and start to mix this gig quieter. I want to let you into a little secret about how we can mix at high sound pressure levels and not offend people. It is true that in the modern era, with a digital mixing console, which is the kind of tool that I would be using most of the time, I'm going to have compressors on pretty much every channel. Certainly on all of the vocal channels, the main instrument channels, they're all going to be compressed. What a compressor does is it stops a volume going beyond a certain level. Effectively, it's like you being able to automatically hold your fingers on all the faders, and every time somebody does something that's a little bit excited, you can pull the faders down instantaneously with almost no delay. When you do this, and we've got strict control of dynamic range, you can allow your mixes to be slightly louder without them being offensive. So really, the job of a live sound engineer is as much about the control of volume and the control of dynamic range as it is about anything else. I would encourage you to try and mix quieter. You will find that if you apply self-discipline and you use compressors to make sure that you have nailed everything down, and a mix that you used to mix at 95 dB can now be mixed at 90 dB, this is a great discipline and will allow you to get emotive music but at a much lower level. One of the most important things about contemporary music is the power that's in kick drum energy. We call it a kick drum because we don't want to mix it up with bass guitar, so we tend to not call it a bass drum. My apologies. So the bass drum of the drummer and the bass guitar. If we strip that context away from contemporary music, it will just make your mix sound stressy and loud. What I'm trying to explain is that sometimes people are complaining that something sounds too loud, and it's because the fundamental context of bass guitar and kick drum is not in your mix. You need to put it there. One of the problems we have in sound systems in churches that have maybe been constrained by budget is that the designer has not realized how important this sub-bass energy is. If you think about the audio spectrum going right down to the lowest notes we're likely to hear, down in the 30 hertz, 30 cycles, 30 hertz, that's like the super low note that maybe a church organ would make, all the way up to 1680 kilohertz, 16 or 18 kilohertz. This is 16,000, 18,000 cycles, the real top end of really an area where as a 50-year-old I probably don't hear those frequencies anymore. If we think about that audio spectrum, half of the power of a modern PA system is 100 hertz and below. I want you to think about a seesaw which is very, very long with a pivotal point which is almost nearly towards one end of it. And that splits our audio system into 50-50 power. 50% of the power of a modern audio system should be addressing only those low frequencies below 100 hertz, and the other half is doing absolutely everything else. This is not well understood by people because they do not understand the need for sub-bass. But if you strip it away from a system, you destroy the LF contour, the low frequency contour of the system, and this will be a very harsh thing to mix on when you do contemporary sound. Often when people come to you and say this is too loud, what they might also be trying to suggest to you is what's going on is just too busy. There are too many vocalists. There are too many notes being played. The keyboard player with the left hand is covering notes that the bass player is also trying to play. The guitarist is trying to play loud when the vocals are going on. There isn't space in the arrangement. The brass is clashing with the vocals. These things should be an interchange. We should have a vocal line delivered, followed by a brass line. We should have an area where the guitarist features, followed by the keyboard, not all at once, all at the same time.